Hello, so welcome to a special episode of Fully Booked. Today's episode, we're going to be answering your questions that you submitted on my latest Instagram post. I'm going to try to answer as many as I can within a sort of a reasonable limit for a video. I don't want it to be too long. So I apologize if I can't get to your question right now. I promise to sort of answer your question next time. So here we go. We're going to look at some questions regarding magic books. The first kind of questions I got regarding magic books is how to choose a good magic book. I got two questions regarding that topic. One from Magic Mark that says, fully booked is great, but how do you choose what books to read and what not to? Another question from Abe Mariel. We know books are expensive. How do you choose the right book for you? And how do you read a book and blah blah blah. So the first part of the question is how you know books are expensive. How do you choose the right book for you? I think it's true to say that books are expensive, right? Because the fact that the book can cost maybe $60 and so on, and then there's shipping as well. And if you live in a country like Singapore, you don't live in the US or in Europe, shipping books to your country can be incredibly expensive because of the weight. For example, I just happen to have a book here, Peter McCabe's Scripting Magic. It looks like a small book, but it's really, really heavy, and the shipping can be quite insane. So how do we do that? So the way I choose magic books is really based on two words. Those two words are track record. What I mean by that is that after doing magic for some time, when you've watched a lot of magic trailers, magic on YouTube, magic on various ways, from DVDs and whatever, so on, you start to have an idea of whose magic you're most interested in learning more. For example, I've seen Dai Vernon on DVD before. I've heard about Dai Vernon before, that he's really good. So yeah, I'm gonna get some of Dai Vernon's books. Everyone says that Marlowe has some great material and is universally acclaimed. So I'm gonna buy some Ed Marlowe books. And so on and so forth. For example, I've seen, and just another example, John Guastafaro. I know that looking at his L&L DVDs is very, very good magic. So when he comes out with a book, I would really want to buy John Guastafaro's books, or Joshua J, or many of my favorite authors are like that. So that's how I choose my books. And that's how I essentially avoid paying a lot of money for a book that I will regret. Now, have I ever bought a book that I regretted? Yes, of course. I've bought some books where I didn't feel it was that amazing and I spent quite a lot of money for it. But that's okay. I just sort of put it back in my shelf, and maybe one day as I grow up, I might find that book interesting again. But right now, when I look at a book, I just don't find it particularly interesting. So it's not always true that you buy a book that has a big name on it, like, I don't know, Ed Marlowe's book, and then you buy it and it turns out always to be amazing. Not all books are amazing. Some books are really bad. So you just have to learn to avoid that author and then just buy another author's book. So another way of choosing good magic books for yourself so that you don't spend too much money on books that you don't want is to first buy books that are essentially compilation books. There are some books that are not based on just one person's work. It's like let's say, for example, the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks by Huggard and Browie. It's a huge book of many tricks by different creators. Look out for those books like that. When you read those books, you get the sensing of whose magic you really, really like. For example, you look through that book and you see this trick that really fits your style, that fits your skill set. You look at the author, and then you go online and you search for books that happen to be published by that author. And that's one way you can be sure that the book you buy will fit your skill set and your interest and your style. So Mariel's question actually has one part which says that we know books are expensive. And I want to talk about that, whether books are really expensive. There are some questions that pertain to that, and I want to point them out right now. Here we go. So Chrysanth Lu asks, this is the digital era. Why do we need to buy books when we can buy ebooks? Okay. Another question from Slightly Retarded, I guess. Why should we get a magic book when there are so many free tutorials and paid downloads? So I think that's one thing. It's a sort of a misconception. I've always felt that it was a misconception that books are expensive. Are books really that expensive? Usually when I buy a magic book, there are like over maybe let's say about 50 items in there, right? Anything from 10 tricks, 20 tricks, up to 50 tricks, or sometimes for big books they cost they have even more tricks in it. And they cost, if you think about the cost per trick, is actually much less than, let's say, if you buy a single trick DVD or a single trick download. A single trick download can be like $10 US. Whereas if I buy a book, like I just happen to have a book here that I'm reading right now, Close Up Illusions by Gary Ouellette. There's so much stuff in here. The Jiminy Cricket Double Lift, the Odd Man Out routine, and there are essays and tips on the classic fours and so on. There's so much stuff. You would think that if one trick is $10, this would cost what? $2,000 or whatever. It doesn't. It usually costs less than $100 or whatever. Whenever it's published, it usually doesn't cost that much. Books are usually around $60 or even at most $80. I don't see why books are expensive. I think the reason why a lot of kids or a lot of new magicians or young magicians find books expensive are for two reasons. Number one, you're young. You don't have a job. You don't have your own income. So if you want to buy books, you probably have to go through your parents. Right, that's quite likely. And so when you go to your parents will be like, why am I buying books that are so expensive, that cost $80? Why don't you just study or something like that? And it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to save money for books. I understand that. But I think the second reason comes from these questions, right? About ebooks and free tutorials and paid downloads. Is that a lot of kids, unfortunately nowadays, when getting into magic, they are used to getting stuff for free. They go on YouTube and you can find a lot of free tutorials and or even paid downloads. Unfortunately, people can easily pirate it and torrent it and download it for free. So they're very used to learning all of this magic for free. Firstly, they get to see the trailer, so they know what they're buying. And when they see, oh, that trick looks so visual, I really want to do it, they'll go on some illegal website and download it for free. And then they learn it for free, and they learn, and they, and to them it's like, oh, magic should just fall from the sky and it's free for them. But in reality, if you think about it, it's actually much more expensive, like I said, to buy these tricks if you were to actually legally buy them. They're not actually that worth it compared to a book. So I want to address this because I think these two questions are very good because they really tackle the heart of Fully Booked, why I'm doing Fully Booked, and why magic books are still important. This is the digital era. Why do we need to buy books when we can buy ebooks? If you can buy ebooks, great. I think it's fantastic. I think you should buy ebooks. For example, I've always wanted to read Alex Elmsley's work. The two best books of his are probably the collected works of Alex Elmsley, Volume 1 and 2. I happen to have a hard copy of Volume 1, but I don't have Volume 2. So I went on the L&L e-book publishing website, and they sell the Alex Elmsley's book for a really cheap price. Let me just check out what the price is right now for you all, right on camera. I'm just going to search. If you buy the hard copy books, they cost like a few $100s, right? But because they're out of print and really hard to find. But look at the Elmsley books. The Elmsley books in ebook form, $19.95. It's $20. That's really, really cheap compared to a few $100s. So it's very, very worth it for you to get ebooks. So if you can buy ebooks in the digital age, go ahead, do it. Unfortunately, there are many magic books out there that are not in ebook form, so you still have to get them in hard copy in a real form instead of a digital form. Secondly, also, why I personally avoid ebooks is because I don't have a Kindle. I could buy a Kindle if I wanted to, if I want to buy an ebook reader. But more importantly, I also don't like ebooks because there is a screen I have to look at. So when the battery runs out, I feel annoyed. I don't know. Books are always there. I can just read them. But honestly, if you like ebooks, go and get ebooks. They're so much more economical and cheap. Do it. Why should we get magic books when there are so many free tutorials and paid downloads? Like I said, it shouldn't be free. You should be paying for the stuff. Whereas for YouTube tutorials, go ahead. If there are free YouTube tutorials, why not? I'm not a person, even though I'm doing Fully Booked, it's kind of ironic. I'm not the kind of person that will say, you must only learn from books because books are the best. Absolutely untrue. If you can find a really good free YouTube tutorial, go ahead and learn from it, right? But unfortunately, like I said, if you only depend on free YouTube tutorials, your magic can only go up to here, right? Because there is so much material from the past 100 years that are still in book form that you're just going to miss out on a lot of good stuff. And a lot of YouTube magicians, some are good, some are bad, they're not going to teach all of this because they're not going to, right? They're only going to teach like this part. So if you're happy with just this amount for free, go ahead. Why not? I mean, people are doing it, you can go ahead, but you'll be missing out on a lot of stuff. That's the only problem. I also have another kind of question, which comes from a few people that ask me how I read magic books. Very interesting question. For example, Augustin Braid asks, when you start reading a book, do you practice all the techniques or tricks in order to see if you like it, or the reaction with laymen, or do you only read what catches your attention? I Love Sheep Forever also asks, will you try at least once for all the effects or tricks in the magic book? Another one from Admo Jokayo. When reading magic books, in my opinion, there are a lot of techniques that are useless or not angle proof. Do you actually practice all of them, or do you just skip to the point that you are interested in? Also, another question from Jordi Narpati. I have two questions. What do you usually try to find when you read magic books? And also, what is the recommended reading style on instructional magic books? My style of reading magic books may not necessarily be the best. I'm simply describing how I read magic books. The way I read magic books is I read it like a cookbook, like a recipe book. I don't read magic books from cover to cover. I don't know if that's the best thing. I know some of you out there are now getting triggered and sort of like getting really angry. Like, what? You don't read the book from cover to cover? I don't read the book from cover to cover. I sort of jump around and see what catches my interest. The reason why I say that is because a lot of magic books, let's say for example, Gary Ouellette's Close-Up Illusions, most books are not accumulative. They're not a storybook. They are more like an instructional manual. So they seem a lot more like cookbooks. There are different recipes in it. And you don't necessarily have to read the first recipe on the first page in order to understand the recipe on the last page. It's not like that. Whereas a storybook, I assume you have to read the first chapter before you understand the second chapter, and so on and so forth. There's no linear storyline in any magic book, or at least most magic books. So I sort of just jump around. When I get a book, let's say like Close-Up Illusions by Gary Oulette, I just sort of flip through and I see, maybe this picture looks interesting to me. Like, this looks like a cool longitudinal palm shift or something like that. I'll have a look and I'll see what the trick is. I'll see like, this thing is called the paradox control. Let's learn it now. I'll put a book down and grab my cards and try to learn something. So essentially this way I'm learning from books in a sort of a non-linear fashion. And I think that is fine. You don't have to read something from cover to cover. My style of reading books, I think it's fun because even though I'm reading in a non-linear fashion, I never quite finish reading the book every time. So every time I put a book back on the shelf after I'm reading it, a few weeks later, when I take it out again and I flip through it because it looks interesting to me again, I will almost always find something new that I've missed. Because as I jump around, eventually I will say, the time I missed this trick because that's where I stopped, and I can continue reading from there. So that's how I read books. I jump around, I see what catches my attention. And I'm not sure if that's a recommended reading style, but I think it's quite fun because, like I said, part of the joy for reading magic books for me is like you're trying to find treasure. You're also constantly trying to find hidden gems in these books. And when I read sort of like in a haphazard fashion, I read back and forth and so on. Later on, when I take it down, I always find something new that I missed the last time. And that's part of the fun for me. So on those questions about whether I practice everything in the book, or do I try out every trick in the book, not always, like I said, which is kind of obvious from my previous answer. I kind of look at what's interesting to me and I learn that. But there are some books that I have read literally cover to cover. So books that I find are really good. As I jump around, I realize, wow, every item that I'm reading is really good. I really want to read every trick in the book. Then I really read cover to cover. But there are only a few books that I really do that. A question I have is a very long question from Ken Practices with Cards, asks, why does this contradiction exist in magic? It is that if you want something not to be known, put it in a book. Yet if you ask anybody knowledgeable about sleight of hand, they will tell you that you should read books. And yet again, not too many people will read them because nowadays everybody is a visual learner. Then they will buy DVDs. Therefore, we have two possibilities. First one, every DVD is trash in order not to reveal good secrets in them, which I don't think so. I don't think so as well. Therefore, people won't buy them for its bad content, and books are amazing but not rare. Second one, books are not that valuable in terms of knowledge, and expert people just recommend books for the sake of doing so. Really good question. This might be one of my favorite questions. However, there is a misconception. When people say that if you want something not to be known, put it in a book, it doesn't mean that they want to hide the item because it is bad. It is a tongue-in-cheek comment because they say that if you want something not to be known because it's too good to be shared with everyone else, you want to keep that secret for yourself, put it in a book, because then the good stuff is all hidden in the books. So it is actually a comment that solidifies why books are good and why you should buy books, because there's a lot of hidden stuff that's really good in magic books. In my opinion, I think that it's not true, even though I love magic books, it's not true to say that books are always good and DVDs are always bad. Just like you say, every DVD is trash and books are all amazing. Absolutely untrue. There are many books that are overrated and really bad that I've bought, and they're terrible. And there are also a lot of DVDs and downloads I've bought that are absolutely terrible. I wish I didn't buy it. But there are also a ton of books that are absolutely amazing and worth every single penny and every single cent I bought it for. And there are also some downloads that are absolutely mind-blowingly good that, also worth every cent I paid for it. So, in fact, in my opinion, the rate of good and bad, like good books to bad books, is about the same as good downloads and bad downloads. It's just that what I feel is that for books, because there's so much stuff in one book, there is actually a lot of stuff that I find to be not very good in every book, not just Close-Up Illusions by Gary Ouellette. I'm just saying in any book, usually about 80% is stuff I will not use, 20% is stuff I will use, which is kind of the same for downloads. Downloads out there, about 20% are good for you, and about 80% of you can just forget about paying for it or buying it to begin with. I don't agree that sentiment. I do agree that there is some sort of chauvinism with some of the older or better magicians. They say like, oh, books are always the best. You must always only buy books. Books are the best. Only buy books. Downloads are whatever books. No, there are some downloads that are absolutely amazing, that are taught by some really good magicians that you should buy. And then there are also some books that are really good and you should buy them as well. So the key thing is good magic comes in many forms. It's not just about whether it's only books or DVDs or downloads and stuff. Good magic comes in all forms, and if you can search out for good magic, you should always do that. Okay, so thank you so much. We've come to the end of our little talk. I hope I didn't go too long, and I hope you've watched through the entire video. If you survived through the entire video, thank you so much. I hope I answered some questions. There are actually many other questions that I haven't gotten to. The most common question are actually questions on recommendations for books, which I will get to next time. But for now, I hope my answers have given you some insight on how I think about magic and how I think about magic books in terms of why I think magic books are important and how I choose magic books and how I read magic books. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Fully Booked, and I'll see you next time.